The opinions expressed by the host and guests in this show are not necessarily the views of Children's Health Defense.
Good morning, CHD. It is Friday, the 13th of February, 2026. In a minute, we have got doctors and scientists coming up for you with a fantastic show. This is really important. Two of my favourite doctors, Dr. Neuenschwander, known as Dr. New, and Chris Shaw with Brian Hooker. So that you're definitely not going to want to miss this one. But first of all, let's talk about this. Let's pull up the headline a second, which is Indian Health Service to end use of mercury-containing dental amalgam by 2027. That's the Health and Human Services putting that out. Who better to talk about this than Charlie Brown? He's been on before and he's back again. Good morning, Charlie.
Morning, Polly. Great to be on CHD TV.
Yeah, it's wonderful to have you on. Just remind people who you are and why you do what you do, please.
Well, I run the campaign for mercury-free dentistry in the United States and worldwide. Our coalition is the World Alliance for Mercury-Free Dentistry. We are consumers for dental choice. I have been a state attorney general. I'm a lawyer, and this is a full-time cause. And we have certainly changed the dynamic considerably, recognizing the mercury is in not only in other places, but it's right there in the mouth, and we can stop that from happening. That's what we do full time.
But it says the Indian Health Authority, if you like. Why them and not anybody else?
Yeah, let's credit Secretary Kennedy very much for what the secretary did here. This is under his command. A year ago, I wrote a guest editorial in Florida's largest newspaper, the Tampa Bay Times, calling for the secretary, Mr. Kennedy, to use the stroke of a pen to end amalgam in federal agencies. The Indian Health Service is the most direct because it's all under his chain of command. The Department of Defense heavily uses amalgam. The Bureau of Prisons, they are not under his command. He runs the Public Health Service and the Indian Health Service. So this is won by a stroke of a pen, and the secretary did this. His record, we all know, is intense interest on mercury. As an environmentalist first, as a health advocate, then in second phase of his career. Now his third phase is government, wonderfully. But the additional is the fact that Native Americans organized. I mean, Native Americans pushed hard. The National Congress for American Indians said we need to end this on tribal lands. The American Indian Treaty Council was our partner, and we all got together and issued the Red River Declarations for mercury, the ending amalgam for indigenous peoples of the hemisphere, by the way, all through. And we want this to continue beyond the United States to American Indians in Mexico and Canada and Brazil and Colombia and so on, Bolivia. So, but this is why Indian Health Service is first, but others will be next. Let's end amalgam in all federal agencies, all state agencies, and for all of us.
Right. Well, Charlie, can you explain to people who maybe don't know why it is so dangerous? Because they go to their dentist and their dentists promote this as being safe and effective and good and strong. You have the strongest teeth if you have amalgam fillings. Can you tell our people why it's so dangerous?
Yeah, Polly, the American Dental Association is a horrible organization. They own patents on amalgam. They are the big advocates. They block this. You think these are usually blocked by big industry. It's not. The American Dental Association is the pro-mercury lobby group in Washington, internationally in Geneva, and in the state legislatures under its state chapters. 50% mercury, 50%, as much. Visualize a fever thermometer that we used to put in our mouths. Of course, we don't do that anymore. But if you remember that, that's some amount of mercury. That's a lot of mercury, half a gram per filling. It's 50% mercury, so the American Dental Association and the pro-mercury dentists, the cheap bureaucrats at places like the Indian Health Service, call it silver, promoted it as silver, falsely. Yes, 50% mercury and, just a little bit of silver, but they just faked us out. The Food and Drug Administration was inert about it. For many years, we petitioned, we sued them. They finally stepped forward. 2020, in fact, at the end of the first Trump term, and stepped up and said, they issued huge warnings, and said, stop that in children, pregnant women. Did the pro-mercury dentists follow the FDA recommendations? No. Federal agencies didn't follow what the federal government, the FDA, said. It was pretty disgusting that you issue these warnings. It's wonderful they issued them, but it's disgusting that private dentistry and public dentistry didn't follow it. What did change is consumer choice. And those of us with a choice, people like you and me, Polly, can say, no, not for me, in the dental chair. But a lot of folks don't have a choice. Soldiers and sailors are stuck with what the lieutenant's going to do, the privates and the seamen and the corporals. The prisoners are stuck with what they're going to do. Medicaid, they're stuck. Indians, we've always treated Indians badly on the reservations, on the tribal lands. They were stuck with what the dentist wanted to do, and that's why the government needs to step in, and that's why it's great Secretary Kennedy has stepped in, and we hope he'll step in now with Medicaid, Dr. Oz and him, to step in with the other agencies and say, let's end this across the board, and we'll take this as well to the state capitals, as we're doing in 2 model states now.
And so for the people watching, Charlie, that are saying, well, I've got a mouthful of them and I can't afford to get them taken out. I mean, is it even safe to get them taken out? Because the mercury, I don't know, does it
Well,
spit out?
that's the trouble. They're bad being in the mouth, and it's dangerous taking them out because the mercury exposure is so great. The removal has to be very careful. If a dentist is not competent, it's a bad idea to remove them. We don't advocate removal. We don't want mass removal because that will also cause mercury toxicity. We simply have got to stop using them. We've got to stop putting them in. Then we'll deal with this mess. But until we stop putting them on, we can't dry off till we while we're still in the shower. So we've got to stop the use of the mercury fillings. The poisoning of the fish, that's a wonderful reason that the Indian Health Service is ending amalgam. The fish that Indian children eat will no longer be poisoned with mercury. Those are the many steps we need to do. So our focus has to be stop its use and stop it now.
Charlie, sorry to sound so ignorant, but why the fish with mercury? How can you explain what that means?
Sure. It's implanted in us, and then it goes from us further. It's the most volatile heavy metal that mercury is, and so it comes out all the time. When we're buried, it's in the ground and it seeps in from then on because mercury will do that. When we're cremated, it goes right into the air. That's why that's why you can't build a crematory near a school, is the mercury fillings toxifying the children in schools nearby. It is a vicious heavy metal. That's why there's an entire treaty just on mercury. So that the major use of mercury in America is by dentists, the number one use. It's disgusting. They don't need to do it. They know how to do the alternatives. The lazy ones, the incompetent dentists, the dentists that are insensitive to patient health and worker health continue to use it. The good dentists don't. The modern dentists don't use that. They're done with it. They know they shouldn't use it and they don't.
So, Charlie, are you saying that they get incentivized to put amalgam fillings in patients?
Am I saying what, Polly?
But they get paid, they get money, they get incentivized.
Oh, yeah, sure. Well, they get money either way, but they can do the dental fillings real easily and get to the golf game faster, get to their tea time faster in the old days. Now the good dentists can do the others just as fast. The dentists claim amalgam is the ones that don't want to train, the ones that sit there, don't want to spend one weekend of training, don't want to keep up on the science, keep up on the technology, say amalgam's better. They're wrong. The others work as well, they last as long, and they can be done as fast. But the old school dentists have not opened a book. They just read the American Dental Association magazine, which is a propaganda organization to keep people using mercury. So the dentists haven't stopped. The dentists who use it haven't stopped. And that's why orders were needed. That's why Secretary Kennedy stepped up and said to the bureaucracy, you're going to stop. I don't care how much you want to keep using it. It's over next year.
But Charlie, surely the dentists that are still using it are making themselves sick. If they're dealing with mercury, they must be getting sick themselves.
You're right, Polly. Dentists have the highest suicide rate in America by far among professions. They're mercury toxic. Their patients, the women that work there, whether dentists or dental assistants, have much more reproductive issues. It's simply being ignored. It's swept under the table. The same, obviously, in your number one cause, mercury in vaccines. It just, well, let's just not think about it. You guys, CHD TV steps forward and said, we need to think about mercury. We need to think about mercury in vaccines, mercury in dentistry. We need to recognize some people are horribly affected and dentists are horribly affected. But again, as long as they seem to think, as long as it doesn't affect them, they can, what the dental school joke is, drill, fill, and bill. And that's what they do. So go to the other dentist. Don't go to that dentist. If that dentist doesn't use amalgam and you find out though, or if they're using it on anyone else, if they're using it on the welfare child, or children of color are much more likely to get mercury fillings than white children. It's just a horror show. And if they're using mercury fillings on anybody, it's time to say sayonara. I'm leaving. I'm going to another dentist, because down the street in your town is a dentist who does not use mercury fillings on anyone. Go spend your money only on that dentist, not on the one that continues to poison children of color, or children who don't have any money, or parents that don't have any money, or who work in these institutions that won't change and they don't change.
And we know that Secretary Kennedy, this has been one of the things closest to his heart for a long time. He's been fighting this for a long time, the mercury situation. So, and this is a huge advancement, this news that you're breaking right now. What's next, and what can we, the people, do to get it so that none of us have to face this again?
Well, thank you. And again, I appreciate CHD TV talking about this. What's next is to end the amalgam in other government programs. I hope people will write Dr. Oz and say, why don't you end this in Medicare? Of course, he works for the secretary. It's a little more complicated because the states are involved. That's why we have model state campaigns in Florida and Rhode Island. And we salute Dr. Latipo, Surgeon General Joseph Latipo, a close friend of Secretary Kennedy, known to you, Polly. And he told the dentists in Florida to stop using amalgam. They aren't necessarily listening, but he issued that warning last year, and we commend him. So what we need to do is move to the other agencies with Indian Health acting. Let's end it in the prisons. Let's end it in the military for soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines. Let's end it in the Medicare programs. The states need to do the same in their institutional uses. Private sector has changed a lot, not enough. And a bad guy in this too is the dental insurance companies. They penalize parents for choosing mercury-free. They charge a fee for mercury-free dentistry, whereas they cover fully the mercury fillings, and that's horrible. We need to change insurance as well. But this step by Secretary Kennedy, based on our petition, based on the advocacy of the American Indian Treaty Council, as well as Consumers for Dental Choice, is the breakthrough, and we're going to run with it. We're going to seize the momentum.
And do you have a website or anything that people can go and follow to keep up to date on this?
Sure. Toxicteeth.org, toxicteeth.org. Join us. They can write me, Charlie at toxicteeth.org. So write me or go on our website and join our list, toxicteeth.org. And just, don't go to the dentist who uses amalgam, and make sure you don't get it. And the soldier and sailor can still demand, we hope it would work, to say, I don't want this, Lieutenant. But we got to intervene for them too. We're going to try.
And in the last minute or so that we have here, just to because we are Children's Health Defence, just to those parents, we've had parents write to us saying that they actually believe that going to the dentist is quite a dangerous place for them to take their young children to, with the fluoride being put around their gums and various other things as well. What should they look for when they're looking for a dentist for their children?
Well, the first is, do you use mercury? Do you use amalgam ever? I want it clear, and I want a written statement from you, because there are stories where dentists say, I won't put an amalgam. They put the child in the back room. The parent is in the lobby, usually low-income situation, and they just put an amalgam anyway. They put an amalgam when the parent says it. They need that in writing. There's not going to be amalgam put in. Fluoride, same thing. I don't want any fluoride put in, because this is my choice. If I want to put fluoride, if I want to buy a fluoride toothpaste, I'll buy it. If I don't want to buy it, I won't use it. There's plenty of fluoride they can get without getting more from the dentist.
Right, Charlie Byrne, you're an amazing human being. Thank you for all the work that you're doing. Please do come back and update us as this progresses, so that our viewers know where we're at and what we can do to help.
Polly, you're a great advocate, and keep educating America and the world.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you, Charlie Brown. All right, everybody. So now we're going to go to a really good episode of Doctors and Scientists with Brian Hooker.
Well, good morning, Children's Health Event. We have such a treat for you today, Friday the 13th, but it's a really, really special Friday because we have in separate interviews Dr. Christopher Shaw from the University of British Columbia. Dr. Shaw, welcome to the show. And later on, we'll be interviewing Dr. James Neuenschwander, both co-authors on our newly released paper on Zanudo, aluminum adjuvants, autoimmunity, autism spectrum disorder, a comprehensive mechanistic, neuropathological, and legal analysis.
Thank you, Brian.
I'm so honored to be in your presence because you've done more solving the issue with this potent neurotoxin than almost anybody in like the frickin' universe. So can you please give me a snapshot of your background and how you came to such a moment like this?
Thank you for your very kind comments. I have had the privilege of working with a lot of really, really great scientists. And you know many of them, if you probably know all of them. Chris Exley is one, Roman Girardi is another, Yuda Schoenfeld a third, Lucia Tomlinovic, Guillemette Crepeau, Luis Lujan. There are a lot of very, very good scientists out there looking at the issue of aluminum toxicity in its many manifestations, both in animal models and in epidemiological studies and analyses of various kinds. And we have worked together intensively. And I must say, I've learned so much from my colleagues. It's actually been a great pleasure to interact with you on this one paper. I think that will really have a profound effect. So in terms of background, excuse me, I get colds from my kids. So those who don't believe in germ theory, guess what? To school, you're going to come back, you're going to get something. I didn't start off to look at vaccines at all. I am a neuroscientist by training. I look at mostly plasticity or pathology in brain, and sometimes the causal mechanisms are very similar, which was odd. And I was looking at a cluster of neurological disease called ALS-PDC, which is a Guamanian form of ALS and Parkinson's. And we decided at one point, we'd done a lot of work. We decided at one point we wanted to find another cluster, another cluster being a certain number of people in a relatively constrained geographic space who have the same thing. And we started looking at Gulf War syndrome because, again, after the Gulf War in 1990-91, a lot of people it had been in the military, came down with this kind of multi-system disorder that had neurological features. And we decided to look at that in more detail. And the first thing we said, well, gee whiz, what could it be? Is it oil well fires? Is it depleted uranium? Is it just any number of things in battlefields or dirty places? And we looked at some of the epidemiology that was emerging. And one of the things that it suggested was the anthrax vaccine. The anthrax vaccine was actually, most soldiers, whether they deployed or not, got the series of shots. They also got a whole bunch of other shots at the same time before they were supposed to deploy. And we looked at that and thought, well, that's interesting. What's in a vaccine? And the answer, overwhelmingly, including in the anthrax vaccine, was aluminum hydroxide in most cases. So, well, gee whiz, aluminum, sure, it's dangerous in water, but, it's in the vaccine. It's a very tiny amount. It can't do anything. And then we did an experiment. And that's probably what we shouldn't have done for a lot of reasons, but we did. And what we saw was that the animals became quite sick. They showed motor neuron features, and we did subcutaneous injections. These were young male mice. We'll get rid of that hypothesis and we'll go on and we'll find something else. And we didn't. So because the mice got sick, motor neurons died, they lost motor function, they lost cognitive function. And I thought, oh, that's really odd because, aluminum is supposed to be safe and effective. Well, it's effective. I'll grant it that. It is very good at simulating immune response. However, when you hear someone like Peter Hotez say, well, the vaccines wouldn't work without aluminum, I suspect he's right, which should beg another question is, wait a minute, if it doesn't work without aluminum or some other adjuvant, is the antigen alone not sufficient to drive an immune response? And the answer seems to be, okay. That's where A.B. Glennie and his colleagues back in 1926 should have stopped the wagon and said, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. Well, but it does. And so you saw ACIP last month basically trying to arm wrestle this to the ground. Like, does it work if you don't put the adjuvant in? They don't know.
And they do not know. What was supposed to happen at the ACIP meeting and what did happen?
Well, what was supposed to happen is that HHS had cobbled together kind of a working group on aluminum toxicity and aluminum in vaccines, more specifically. But it was broader spectrum, because aluminum is toxic no matter how you get it into you. As you know, it's great stuff to make airplanes out of. You don't want it in your body. Okay, so we were looking at that, and again, that that kind of a working group, mostly of international scientists who worked on it. HHS under Kennedy put together this group. We were having conversations, and finally, it was decided that one of our members, Lucia Tomlenovic, would present the kind of fairly extensive slide deck to ACIP over a couple hours, and there was a lot of material, and some of the rest of us are going to be there as kind of backup. If they want to ask about animal research, I could be there, or Luis could be there, or others could be. If they wanted a broad spectrum analysis, someone like Chris Exley was going to come. And it never happened. So we were, we had our flights booked, we had our hotels booked, and a couple of days before the meeting, we were told, no, stand down, we're not doing it. And we don't fully understand why. In the end, ACIP had their meeting in December 5th. 4th and 5th, they talked on the last day a little. They were talking mostly about the schedule and the Hep B vaccine on day 1, but on day 2 they started talking a little bit about aluminum and what we know and what we don't know, which is quite a lot, and what we know is also quite a lot. But they are very cautionary in what the things that are known, and that's as far as it got. The idea was we would come back in February and present the thing we were supposed to present last month. Crickets. We haven't heard anything since then, so we don't know what's going on.
So you don't know. I mean, there wasn't any type of rationale. It was just like, okay,
the rationale was there's something called a FACA, which is, I'm not swearing here, honestly. Yeah. It's called the Federal Advisory Committee Act. And even though the secretary can appoint and fire people from the ACIP committee, he can't really tell them how to do their own internal machinery. And, in other words, what you're going to schedule, when you're going to schedule, how much time you're going to give to those things. And that's seemingly where HHS ran kind of crossed wires with HHS and ACIP. And so we just got postponed. We built something like 167 slide deck, and I think A, they got scared, and B, they just didn't have it in their schedule. So I don't know if it was I don't think it was so much ill intention. I think it was just people knew what their relative jobs, not knowing quite how the other worked well.
Okay.
Anyway, so we're still there. All of us are still there. We're waiting for a go-ahead to do that. We'd like to do that. Since then, as you know, there have been a series of papers. It's almost like a wave of, aluminum is good for you papers. There have been 3 or 4 studies.
Nuremberg 2025. Yeah.
Have you looked at the authors of that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh my
absolutely.
God. What Nuremberg, I don't know the gentleman's first name, but he has no credentials. None.
Oh,
none.
No.
It's like, okay. The last author is a fellow who runs a clinic in South Florida. Okay, well, that's nice. He has no credentials. The middle author is someone who used to be on ACIP and obviously is very bitter. Doesn't seem to know a lot about aluminum. So, what you see is a basically word salad document that basically quotes a lot of the literature that has absolutely no relevance to the topic at hand. Is aluminum toxic?
Gotta love AI.
I just looked at a paper by McClure et al. Much the same kind of thing. I mean, so these are people that are desperately trying to defend a practice that's been in place for 100 years, that has never been allowed to undergo the kind of scrutiny that you would think any substance that's given to humans, especially children, would receive, and it just doesn't. So there's so many unanswered questions. And when you heard the ACIP members asking the questions, do we know what happens on day 1? You don't. Do we? And all the what do we know what the dose is? We don't. And the NIH and CDC people in the background admitting, well, we never looked. Well, come on, guys, you're giving this to millions of kids. Anyway, so kind of against 3 of the members, the rest of the members voted to take it out of day 1. Good.
Right.
But the bigger question is, and that's, the elephant in the room, that's the mouse in the room. The elephant in the room is, why is it in any schedule? Are you sure you need it? Are there safer things you could do? What happens if you give Hep B on day 366? Get it out of the first year, because as we show in our paper, there is this kind of disturbing overlap between neural development, synaptic development, axonal development, immune system, and the bulk of the shots the kids are going to get in the first year.
Right.
I mean,
And how, I mean,
Sorry.
I want to back up a little bit because I want you to answer how prevalent is aluminum in the vaccination schedule. I mean, when we talked about thimerosal in the vaccination schedule after 2003, it was essentially the flu shot and a few tetanus toxoids that would slip through. But how about aluminum? How pervasive is aluminum exposure if you follow the CDC schedule?
Something like 2/3 of pediatric vaccines are adjuvanted with.
So it's huge.
It is, yeah. And you're giving a lot of them in that first year when all that neural and immune stuff and interactions between those two important systems are going on. And then, and then shock and horror, we've messed up people's, immune systems and their nervous systems. Like, this should not be a particular surprise to anyone. And the surprise is why they keep doing it. And you're listening to some of the ACEP people, justifying doing it and turning themselves into literal pretzels to justify doing something that clearly, at least for some individuals, is harmful. When you look at the numbers, what 1986, when there was 1 in 10,000 kids with somewhere on the spectrum, now when 1 was 31 or more,
right?
Look, something's going on. Maybe again, let's argue it's not aluminum, but then what? And there were other, many other suggestions over the years. But what you've done in that paper is something that Lucia Tomlanovic and I did, in a smaller level back in 2011 when we looked at much the same question without the detail that you provide. But that's the Hill criteria. Hill criteria are there to help you decide if there is possible causality in some sort of relationship.
Right.
And there is. I mean, the clue is, it doesn't mean it's not the end of the story. It doesn't, we know it's QED, therefore we're done. No, it means now you need to go take a real serious hard look, because
absolutely, and it's weird. I have to apologize because when we set out, the group of co-authors set out to look at vaccines and autism, we did not start on aluminum, but we looked at the literature. We looked at as much information as we could get our hands on between the groups of us, and the consensus is we've got to do something about aluminum. Something is going on, and we looked around. It's like none of us are experts in aluminum. I have Chris Shaw's phone number. Yay me. And I'm so glad that you're a part of this project. It's weird because by looking at the literature, that is the problem that we landed on within the whole space of vaccines.
I really do think it's the elephant in the room. I know there was some commentary about Tylenol and things like that. The reality, Brian, is we live in a toxic world. All these things add up. But I think aluminum, if you had to say, what's the one thing you really don't want kids to get early in life? And I would have to say it's aluminum.
I've gone down the rabbit hole in both. I think both are really, really bad ideas.
They are really bad. Well, they might have been a great idea back in 1926 when Burroughs Wellcome was trying to figure out why their vaccines didn't work. But since then, you'd think there would have been more scrutiny, not just grandfathering it and not failing to recognize that 1926, you probably had one vaccine or whatever the number was.
Right.
And up until the 80s, you had half a dozen, maybe a dozen. Not all of them aluminum adjuvanted. But now the massive number of vaccines that kids get exposed to, many of them in the first year, the developmental year for brain systems. And, no one's gone back and said, gee whiz, it's like a beer experiment, Brian. And go into a bar and have one beer and, next day you probably feel pretty good. Go into the bar and have 10 beer and see what's going to happen. It's like, this is kind of basic toxicology and dose response stuff. Honestly, it's like, this is not really hard. But they carry on year after year and just stuff more vaccines on them. And now they say, mRNA will replace everything. So that's fine. No, it's not. mRNA vaccine has probably killed and damaged more people than every vaccine up until now. It's anyway. Don't get me started on that.
Well, I can't thank you enough for you speak the truth. When you talk to luminaries like you, Christopher Exley, Uta Schoenfeld, Rowan, we met Kripo, Lucia. The truth is just sort of like obvious, like, oh, well, what else would you do? But you face consequences for doing that.
Oh yeah.
And you've had, you've faced significant consequences for what you've done. And I can't thank you enough for just sticking with it and sticking with the truth and making saving kids more important than even your livelihood.
Well, I think we, all of us who, whether we're parents or not, we should always try and save kids, and let them grow up healthy and happy, and they're our future. And when you damage them, and I mean, totally apart from the economics of it, right, you're damaging a generation, with now several generations of kids. And obviously, with the numbers, unless somebody is calculating it completely incorrectly, the numbers are getting worse. Therefore, more people are getting sick from whatever that thing is, be it aluminum or tomato soup or whatever it is. But I'm betting on aluminum as the driver of this.
Well, it's been a privilege to work with you, and I'm looking forward to continuing work with you. Thank you so much for joining us. We're going to have you back on after this is just a preprint. We're working on the draft to get it in a peer-reviewed journal, and so there's more to come in the story.
Good stuff, Brian. I'm looking forward to the final draft, and it looks good so far. So I'm looking forward to seeing that out there in the world.
Thanks again, and thank you everybody for joining us for this segment of Doctors and Scientists. We will also be interviewing Dr. James Neuenschwander next. Well, good morning, CHD. It is your host, Brian Hooker, and it is time for Doctors and Scientists. And one of my favorite doctors is Dr. Neuenschwander. Of course, we call him Dr. New because, my tongue is usually not able to say Enschwander. Dr. New, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much, Brian.
I am so blessed to have worked with you on this research paper that came out on February 2nd on aluminum adjuvants. And it's a review paper regarding the connection between aluminum adjuvants to autism spectrum disorder. Why in the heck should we listen to New about autism? If somebody's been living on Mars for a while and they just catapulted home, then why?
Well, I've been treating kids on the autism spectrum since the mid 2000s. And, I always say it may have been my second or third patient where I sat there and mom or dad or both of them said, these symptoms started after vaccine X, Y, and Z. And of course, being a good doctor, I'd been trained to understand that vaccines don't cause autism. But when you actually have parents start telling you that this happened after vaccine, it made me start taking a dive into what's going on, and then realize that my belief system was exactly that, a belief system, and not something that was grounded in science. That at the end of the day, the studies had not been done that said whether or not vaccines caused autism, other than you had a lot of parents that were claiming that there was a link. And that took me down the rabbit hole of the individual vaccines, the vaccine schedule, the ingredients in vaccines, particularly the aluminum adjuvants, or just adjuvants in general, and understanding. Eventually, we started to understand that autism is really, for most kids, is an encephalitis, an inflammation of the brain that is creating autism. This is not bad parenting. This is not some random genetic mutation. This is actual inflammation of the brain. And then you sit back and you go, well, here you have a product that its entire job, that would be the adjuvant in the vaccine, its entire job is to stimulate the immune system. You have a set of kids that, from the genetics point of view, they don't necessarily detox all that well. You start putting those two together and go, well, wait a minute, if this causes immune activation, and if you don't detox it, that immune activation will continue, and autism is an issue with immune activation, at least for a large group of these kids, why wouldn't there be a link? And that took me down that rabbit hole.
Well, I'm so thankful that you listen to parents, and I'm also thankful that you were willing to do your research on this. I mean, you just don't find practitioners that we'll take the time to do that. Rather, we'll read sort of the standard of care or the guidelines by the American Academy of Pediatrics or the CDC, although some of the guidelines of the CDC are changing. At least when you access the website that says vaccines don't cause autism, there's a funny asterisk
Yes, there is.
of the of that particular statement with a proviso that says this is wrong, but Bill Cassidy, etc. When did you start to really look at adjuvants? Well, I first of all, just to break down the basics, what's an adjuvant? Why would an adjuvant be a problem? And why in the heck would you put aluminum? Aluminum is not it's not like an essential mineral or anything like that, is it?
No, I mean, aluminum, as far as we know, doesn't have any function in the body. It's, there's a ton of aluminum in Earth's crust, but there never was a whole lot of aluminum in our diet. So it was never an essential element for us. And as far as I know, there's no biochemical reactions that require aluminum. So really, it goes back to the early days of trying to figure out what is autism, first of all, because here's this mystery disease that I knew nothing about. And I've got a kid sitting in my office that looks like they have a neurologic disorder, and I'm being told, oh no, this is a psychiatric disorder, it's genetic, it's whatever the theories were at the time, and start looking at what causes autism. So you can start with that question. You understand autism is not one thing, it's a spectrum, meaning there's multiple reasons why people can develop autism. But early on, again, around the time that I had started in this whole mission, we knew that inflammation, particularly brain inflammation, was part of the autism spectrum. These kids just had more inflammatory markers than other kids, even in their brain, in their spinal fluid. So back to what is an adjuvant, I mean, you have to put something into most vaccines, unless it's a live virus vaccine, in which case the virus itself stimulates the immune system. You have to put something in the vaccine to get the appropriate immune response. Otherwise, nothing happens, your vaccine doesn't work. So the thing that does that is the adjuvant. Now, in the case of a lot of these vaccines in the childhood schedule, the adjuvant is aluminum, and there's 3 different types of aluminum. We don't have to get into that, but basically these are aluminum nanoparticles. These are not aluminum salts like what you get in food, or there's more aluminum in a bottle of formula than there is in the whole vaccine schedule. It's like, yeah, but that's a completely different form of aluminum that gets absorbed and eliminated by the kidneys. It's not going to build up in your brain. The stuff we inject intentionally stimulates an immune response. That's its job. So these are aluminum, little particles of aluminum. We call them aluminum nanoparticles. They're taken up by white blood cells. That activates the immune system. The theory long ago was you put the shot into the thigh muscle and it stays in the thigh muscle. I don't know why anybody thought that could even be reality, but that was what I was taught, and I just accepted it until I started thinking about it and going like, what's so special about this? Why does that stay there when anything else you put in that muscle is going to distribute to the body? So all these things started with, what is autism? Autism appears to be inflammatory. That's at least a big chunk, about 2/3 of all kids on the spectrum. They have evidence of brain inflammation. And then we have this item over here that creates inflammation. And I always say these adjuvants are fine-tuned to a certain level of reactivity. You have the bell curve of reactivity. It's targeting the middle of the bell curve. Well, what if you have a kid that's way out on the tail here that is overreactive to a vaccine? We know there are kids on the other end, like no vaccine has 100% efficacy. So we know there are kids on the bottom end that don't react. But what about the top end? What about those kids? What happens when they get this vaccine? Particularly if those kids don't detox well. If they don't have the genetics to get the enzymes that actually remove the aluminum or remove lead, mercury, some of these other toxins that we get in the environment, or even, glyphosate and all that stuff, if they don't remove it, then already they're more susceptible to injury. And if they don't detox it, then whatever that overreaction to the inflammatory thing in the vaccine is going to create problems for them. And that's what we're seeing in this paper. We didn't make this up with how aluminum adjuvants work. I mean, this is from the people that actually make the adjuvants telling us this is what we think happens, that this thing gets put in a muscle, they're aluminum nanoparticles, they're taken up by macrophages, which is a type of white blood cell. They go to the local lymph node, they stimulate the immune response. But they stop there. right? What we're saying is, yeah, but if you take that and we got evidence that they don't stay in the lymph node either, these things travel to wherever they're called, including the brain. And oh, well, a macrophage is too big to cross the blood-brain barrier. Yeah, unless it's damaged from something like inflammation, then all of a sudden this macrophage with its load of aluminum gets into the brain where it stays there. Right, we don't, we're not able to detox it. So all these things, if you start down that rabbit hole, you're going to end up in the same place. And the only reason why you wouldn't is if you're not even willing to look at the evidence that's out there. And that's what we did with this paper. I mean, this is a lot of literature we're reviewing. We didn't take one paper and write an article on it. I mean, this is really reviewing the literature of all these segments of how can this create this. And again, we started at both ends of the scale, right? This was a process. What does aluminum do? What is autism? And they meet in the middle because aluminum sets off these things that create the inflammatory phenotype that we call autism.
Why would it be there? I mean, we know functionally why it's there, but we hear the mantra safe and effective. Well, shouldn't aluminum have been tested to be safe and effective?
Okay,
in
this is the mind-blowing thing. This is the most mind-blowing thing of anything I've ever done in researching something for my patients. All right, you would think we've been using these things for some of them over 100 years. You would think we have mountains of evidence as to what aluminum does to us. The reality is we have next to no studies of the effects of injecting aluminum and nanoparticle aluminum adjuvants into muscle and what it does to human beings. Even animal studies, I mean, you have to go way back, and I believe there's one study with 4 guinea pigs or 4 hamsters or whatever it was to determine even where it goes in the body. So, the whole thing with the adjuvants is they are not approved independent of the vaccine. So the adjuvant vaccine combination is what the FDA approves. So they really don't have studies on the adjuvant all by itself. And you can also say, well, there's also some ethical issues here because, are we really going to inject healthy people with something that activates the immune system with no potential benefit to it at all? So, that's the argument against doing these studies individually. But they haven't even done it on animals. We don't have monkey trials. Guinea pigs are a reasonable substitute for the human immune system, but we don't have those trials. And the bottom line is, who's going to pay for it? I mean, the vaccine companies are not going to step up to the plate and say, oh yes, this adjuvant we've been using for the last 100 years, now we're going to spend hundreds of millions of dollars to determine the safety and efficacy. At this point, it has to be in the government's hand to do those kinds of trials, and they're not going to do them. The problem with we need to get aluminum out of the vaccine. Okay, I'm all about that. But what are you going to put in its place? The bottom line is the whole design of the vaccine has to change because whatever adjuvant you put in there is probably going to create the same problems. This is what we saw with the COVID vaccine. It wasn't aluminum, but those lipid nanoparticles are what stimulated the immune response for the COVID vaccine. And with that, we had even more problems. So again, what do we use here? And it really brings into play this whole concept of, rather than safe and effective, it's more unavoidably unsafe, which is what the Supreme Court said it was.
Right.
That which is the reality. It's unavoidably unsafe. So that's fine if the benefit of the vaccine outweighs that unsafeness, and if you can identify a susceptible population to the damage, then maybe we can minimize the damage. And in medicine, everything's risk-benefit across the board. I'm not a fan of injecting anybody with a vaccine unless their risk of that disease is so great and the benefit of that vaccine is so great that you're willing to take the risk that this could screw you up and create an autoimmune encephalitis or a lupus or a immune system dysfunction or gut issues or whatever the problem might be. It has to be worth that risk anytime you're looking at a medical intervention.
You teach this, you talk about this, and I think most importantly, you talk about how to fix this. How do we get more information from what you do and the organizations that you work with.
Yeah. Well, I'm the president of the Medical Academy of Pediatrics and Special Needs. I mean, we're trying to place ourselves as an alternative to the American Academy of Pediatrics. We deal with children with special needs, not just autism, but across the
Right.
board, children with chronic illness, and we teach these principles. I mean, let's look at root cause. So if you're the Center for Disease Control, and your idea of disease control is a vaccine, then you're missing a whole huge chunk called the human immune system and other elements of health that we teach. How do you stay healthy? How do you get a child that is not going to die if they get the measles or influenza or COVID or any of those kinds of things? Because we know there are risk factors with all those diseases, and we also know there are ways to treat those diseases. We also know that wise man once said, no disease was ever caused by the lack of a pharmaceutical agent, right? We don't get depression because we have an acute Prozac deficiency. There's other things going on. And the job of the physician should be identify what's causing that problem. Do they have a methylation disorder? Are they toxic? What do we need to do about it? So the organization is the Medical Academy of Pediatrics and Special Needs. We shorten it to MAPS. Our website is medmaps.org. And we have a conference coming up in March. So this is the first time. The conference will be in Charlotte, in North Carolina. We do an East Coast conference in the spring, West Coast in the fall. And this one, it's the first time that we're adding a parent track. So the medical conference is March 12th to the 14th. In my humble opinion, the best conference you'll ever go to. It doesn't just have to be pediatrics. This is the basis of integrative root cause medicine. You will learn more biochemistry than you probably ever want to know, but you'll also understand how to approach medical problems without necessarily reaching for your prescription pad. It's open to any medical practitioner. I always say if you have a shingle on the wall, and you see kids in your practice, you probably should come to a MAPS conference. It's a great environment. It's very family, it's sort of a MAPS family, and you learn all these things. And then this is the first year that we're doing a parent conference. So the parent conference will be on Sunday, March 15th, same site in Charlotte. And again, all that information is on the medmaps.org website. And I believe we also have a discount code for people that are watching this show.
That's right. It's CHD20 is the discount code that you want to use, and that applies. It's the same discount code for the that you can use for the professional track or the parent track. So please, I have gone to the MAPS conference that you had in Phoenix. It was absolutely wonderful. And you meet so many good practitioners there. It's just such a networking opportunity, regardless of your whether you're a professional or a parent, because there are just so many things to learn about. And then those practitioners who are presenting are there to talk. They talk to the parents, they interact with the people. It's a very, very really, really good conference to be at.
I always say I learn more in the hallway and the bar than I do in the lecture room. So, and we try to, one of our policies is if you're speaking at MAPS, you're going to be there for the whole conference. I want you available to, participants to be able to answer individual questions. So that's one of the great things. I don't jet in and present and then jet out. I'm there for the whole conference.
Well, super. Dr. New, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for writing this paper with us grifters from CHD. No.
Well, no, it's been a great experience. This paper had to be written and from the get-go, I told you this is very, very significant. What we have here is something unique, and that message needs to get out there. People need to understand that there are mechanisms for how vaccines can cause autism, and at the very least, somebody needs to be doing some heavy-duty research on this.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again. And thank you, everybody, for watching this interview and this important episode of Children's Health Defense. Tell everybody to check this out. Dr. James Neuenschwander, Dr. Chris Shaw in the same episode, all for free. Have a great day.
We are live. Tell us your name, please.
Hi there, Hannah Harold.
And this is about your dad and your uncle. Should we start with your uncle?
Sure, yes.
So he took Johnson & Johnson.
Yes.
First of all, do you know why your family would sort of into taking the COVID shots?
Influence.
Yeah.
The influence of others around them. Encouraged them to get protected. And he was healthy, vibrant, active as could be, always conscious about what he ate. He thought the Johnson & Johnson would be the best route because it was a one and done. And he took it, and within about a month or two after, we got a call that he was gone. He had gone to the hospital, had been there for a few days, and passed away. Pretty sudden. After he had passed, I guess the autopsy came back that he had abnormal blood clots throughout his whole entire body, which is not okay.
What was his health like before he took Johnson & Johnson?
Great. It was great. I know in the past year or so before that he was dealing with heart, some sort of heart issues, but it was level. It was good, safe, okay, and it must have just amplified whatever the problem going on in his heart was. So other than that, he was vibrant, a vibrant, active, happy, healthy man.
And so blood clots?
Blood clots, abnormal blood clots throughout both of his legs and his whole body.
Oh, I'm really sorry to hear that.
Thank you.
And then what about your dad?
My dad had been diagnosed with cancer going on 5 years ago, so 2018 or 19.
What kind of cancer did you say?
It was colon cancer, and it was confirmed. It had metastasized from his colon to his liver, but it wasn't super aggressive. It was controllable, and after he had the tumor removed off of his liver, the liver was beautiful, healthy. The doctors felt very confident that he would, thrive afterwards, which he did. He was doing great. And then he was encouraged to get the Moderna. He got the first round, and the day he got it, he could not move. His muscles hurt so bad that it was hard to even open and close his hands. I remember him telling me. He said it felt as though he hadn't worked out in 20 years and decided to run a marathon. And he overcame that, got his strength back, and then I'm not quite sure how long after he was talked into getting a booster. And that really screwed him up.
Another Moderna?
Correct. And he actually didn't admit it because I didn't think it would be good because his immune system was already under such attack with chemo and cancer and just everything, especially the first shot. So he got that second one, and he had kind of a pre-deathly sick experience, and he was bedridden for over a month, and he wasn't sure he was going to make it out.
What do you mean by that?
He couldn't move, he couldn't walk, he couldn't eat, he just couldn't function. I recall him telling me was just anything he would put down he would throw up or put out. His body would reject anything he put in him. And so after he slowly recovered from that, he had somewhat of stability, except for he became so skeletal that he was just mostly bedridden. His activities that he was doing prior to that second booster shot had gone away. He couldn't even be standing upright for more than minutes. And then a year after that, he passed in a suffrage situation. Yes, I ended up being his hospice nurse, I guess you would say. And he was my best friend. Yeah, him and I were very, very close.
I'm sorry.
Me too.
Did you take the shot?
No, I did not. I refused.
Do you have siblings?
I have two.
How are they doing?
They're great. One out of the two would have lost his job if he didn't take it. But he's okay. He's healthy and vibrant and thriving. So but my other one didn't take it, and is doing good.
So what do you want to say to the people? What's your advice? What's your warning?
Just stay healthy. Keep yourself healthy and active, and I wouldn't take anything that has no research done on it longer than at least a year, but even then it's still too short. You don't know. Our human body is so amazing and can heal from the most aggressive cancers if you just give it what it needs. And I would definitely think before you inject. And probably choose the alternative route. Boost your immune system and keep yourself healthy and happy however you can.
Thank you for telling your story. I'm sorry about your dad and your uncle.
Thank you. Me too.
This and all CHD TV programming is made possible by generous support from viewers like you. Please consider making a contribution today to keep our programming going strong. Thank you.